Hey everyone, welcome to US Daily Beat. It's Tuesday, August 25th, 2026, and I'm so glad you're here. We've got some really interesting stories for you today. China hits out at illegal new US sanctions on Iran and trading partners. CIA chief travels to Moscow for unannounced talks, US media reports. Iran says it is fully prepared to counter widened US economic sanctions. But real quick before we dive in, if you'd like to support the channel, go ahead and subscribe and give this video a like. It genuinely means the world to us, and it's what keeps this show going every single day. All right, with that said, let's get into it. So first up today, we're looking at world news. The back and forth between Washington and Beijing just got a little sharper over Iran. China is blasting the newest U.S. sanctions as illegal, after Washington threatened to isolate countries that keep doing business with Tehran. And that matters because Iran still relies heavily on oil sales, with much of that crude headed to China. Here's the bigger picture. The U.S. has been trying to squeeze Iran for years with sanctions, mainly over its nuclear program and regional activities. This latest move raises the pressure not just on Tehran, but on any country that still helps keep its economy afloat. China, for its part, says it opposes using sanctions as a tool of long-arm jurisdiction, which is diplomatic speak for one country trying to police everyone else's trade. So why should we care? Because this isn't just about Iran. It's about whether the U.S. can force other major economies to choose between access to the American market and doing business with countries under sanctions. And if Beijing digs in, this could add another layer of tension in an already fragile U.S.-China relationship. What happens next will depend on whether these threats turn into real enforcement, and whether China changes course or doubles down. All right, so in world news, there's a pretty notable piece of back-channel diplomacy unfolding here. U.S. media are reporting that CIA Director William Burns traveled to Moscow for unannounced talks, and flight tracking data appears to back up at least part of the trip. According to that data, an American military aircraft flew from the United States to Russia on Tuesday, making a stop in Latvia along the way. Now, when you hear something like this, the big thing to remember is that these kinds of visits usually happen quietly on purpose. They're often about keeping communication open when the public talks are tense, and right now there's no shortage of tension between Washington and Moscow. That could mean anything from trying to prevent miscalculation, to discussing prisoners, to sending a message about larger security issues. What should we be watching? First, whether either side confirms the trip or the purpose behind it. And second, whether this leads to any visible shift in U.S.-Russia contacts. Even if nothing dramatic comes out immediately, a visit like this tells us the two governments are still talking, even if most of that conversation is happening out of sight. Switching gears here, this one's about business and finance. If you've been watching oil prices, shipping routes, or even the broader mood in global markets, this is one of those stories that could ripple far beyond the headlines. The U.S. has rolled out a new round of sanctions on Iran, and Washington is calling it an economic D-Day, which gives you a sense of how seriously it's framing this move. The idea is to tighten the economic squeeze even further, especially on sectors and networks that help Iran move money and sell oil. Iran, though, is saying it's not caught off guard. Officials there say they're fully prepared to deal with the pressure and that they have a plan in place. That's important because sanctions aren't just political theater. They can affect energy markets, regional trade, and the cost of doing business for companies far outside the Middle East. So, what should we watch? First, whether Iran retaliates economically or politically. Second, whether these sanctions actually bite harder this time or just deepen an already strained standoff. And for anyone following markets, the big question is whether this turns into another shock that pushes energy and shipping costs higher. All right, so in business and finance, when you hear talk about a new round of pressure on Iran, the first thing to know is that Iran has lived under U.S. sanctions for years, so it's not starting from zero. Over time, it has built workarounds and deep trade relationships that help keep its